I'm Shaughnessy McDaniel from Siege Perilous, coming in with the second of our interview series. I'm joined here by AfterTime. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Happy to be here.
Just want to start off by saying the new album is absolutely kick-ass. Arcane Horizons, right? Really, really, really good stuff. So if you guys would start off, for the people who are watching this and don't know you, could you start off by just kind of introducing yourselves and your role in the band?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Wolf, so I'm the vocalist in the band. I do also help with some of the songwriting.
And I am Brad. I'm rhythm guitars, harsh vocals, and I do a lot of the compositions. I work with Sarah quite a lot.
Cool. So let's start. Like, what's the origin story of your band? How did you guys get going on this adventure?
Yeah. So in 2011, that's a lot of years ago now.
Oof.
I met Chris, the other guitarist. He does lead guitars. He also helps songwrite and stuff too. I met him, and we just started basically working on small little doodles of music in his basement for a little while. And then the following year, we met AJ, who was our drummer. And then in late 2014, so there was a few years between us meeting AJ and then finding Sarah and our first bassist, Malachi. So we've been around for quite a few years now, but like the first several, it was kind of just a slow build until we were able to start demoing and stuff. But yeah, it started with Chris and I in 2011.
That's great. I know that like that was definitely our uphill battle for a while. I mean, it took us a while to get like all the pieces of the lineup, everybody kind of stable and everybody kind of on the same page. It's definitely not something that happens overnight as much as one would wish that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So for us, it was a lot of years of trying to figure out what our style was too. So even if we got Sarah in 2014, we were still demoing, I think, for 2 years trying to nail down those first few songs.
Yeah, and those songs had mostly already been written prior to me joining, so they weren't necessarily written for my voice, and I just kind of had to adapt my voice to it. And I think, like a lot of bands in our genre, we started with a lot more gothic flair than we maybe have nowadays, but, you know, it's all part of the growth and part of the journey.
Yeah, definitely. Like the new stuff that we've been working on is very different from the first stuff, which definitely like was trying to find the sound. There were ideas, but it wasn't all there yet. So kind of talking about like genre and sound, you know, you guys are kind of in the power and symphonic sub-genres. I definitely hear, you know, a lot of inspiration from bands like Nightwish and Epica in some of what you're doing. But what other bands or what other kind of musical movements inspired your sound?
I would say my background prior to joining the band, I didn't actually even know that symphonic metal was a thing. I'd very much been raised to emulate my songwriting after soundtrack music, specifically like video game soundtracks and later on more like movie soundtracks. So adding into the metal sound, I like to think of a lot of influence comes from like James Horner from Titanic, Braveheart, obviously John Williams. Everybody knows John Williams. And on the VM side, my favorite, his name is Yasunori Mitsuda. He's most well known for Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Legaia 2, a handful of other amazing games. So that's the spice that I bring into it.
Yeah, I love that.
Like you said, Nightwish, Epica, big influences for us. Within Temptation has always been another big one. There's so many bands that are like really big in this genre that we look up to a lot. Yeah, we kind of pull inspiration musically from a few different places. Like Sarah said, there's a lot of soundtrack because we are so symphonic. We pull in like the movie score, cinematic feel as well.
Yeah, I love that. As I've been like working on my music theory and bringing in new ideas, looking at what a lot of those composers have done, a lot of the ones you listed, especially James Horner and John Williams, and who wrote the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. It's going to bother me. It's going to bother me. But yeah, looking at what they've done, like massive help in just figuring out how to arrange, how to create some of these like sonic ideas. So yeah, I definitely hear that across a lot of your music, especially on the new album, Arcane Horizons. Tell me about, since we talked about some of the writing theory and background behind it, what the writing process looks like for you guys.
So sure, quick before that, Howard Shore.
Howard Shore!
It was Howard Shore! Oh my gosh, I feel so stupid.
I have end of the day brain. That's what I'm going to blame it on.
Yes.
As far as songwriting, we're all very collaborative. I think the pattern we've kind of fallen into is we all individually kind of come up with an idea for a song, maybe like hash out some of the very beginning structure, and then we all work with each other to write like I don't write the drums, I don't write any bass or guitar, but I'll present what I do have and everybody kind of writes for their own parts. Brad does a lot of the orchestral writing, especially on this most recent album. So, I mean, the credit kind of gets spread out between all of us over the course of an album.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's also great when you can do it like you guys have, where like it definitely still feels cohesive, right? It doesn't feel like one of those group projects in high school where you're like one person did all the work and everybody was slacking off. It feels very cohesive, very tight. And it's cool that you guys that everybody gets to collaborate on the writing process. I think that's awesome. So this album, it definitely has some varied subject matter in it, right? Going from some like Arthurian legend stuff to Ragnarok. What would you say is kind of the connection between the songs on this album?
For this album, we pulled a lot from mythology, like you mentioned. We, ever since our debut album, we've tried to present ourselves as storytellers. Like on that album, I like to say it's historical fiction on that album. But Farther Shore is a lot more of a concept album than this one is. This one's tied by just the feeling of mythology, whether it's real mythology or stories we made up and then, like I said, presented in a way that feels like it's mythology. Anytime we came up with a story, we still try to make it feel like it fit in with the ones that are known already. So while the album's not strictly a concept album, there is that thread going through the whole thing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that it was varied, but it definitely, it has those threads and connection between each of the songs. So let's talk about, you guys just released the first single off of the album, Sons of Fenrir. So where did you kind of get your inspiration, and how did you decide to take this particular kind of angle and approach to telling the story of Ragnarok? I mean, a story that certainly pops up a lot in heavy metal, but you guys have put your own kind of stamp on.
This one was 100% Brad, so I'll let him take it.
This was the first song that I wrote for the album. I think we have like a partial of another song started, but this was the first one that was finished. And we knew from right away that we wanted to do this mythology-based stuff. So I just started looking at whatever stories I could find, but I knew that this song was going to be very energetic, very in your face and epic. So I wanted a story that kind of fit that feeling too. And that's where I found the Hot Day in School thing. They were constantly chasing the sun and the moon. They're constantly on the move, which is what the song is. Like as soon as it starts, it doesn't let up till you get to the end of the song. But I have a funny story kind of about this one. In what year were we in Boston? Was that New Year's for 22?
Into 22, yeah.
Into 22. We were in New Year's. We spent New Year's in Boston, the whole band, because we're friends with the band members of Seven Spires, and they were putting on a New Year's Eve show that we attended. We stayed in Boston for about 5 days after that, and I had the idea for the chorus melody for Sons of Fenrir while we were in Boston. I'm like, the first day. My stupid brain never realized my phone had a voice recorder in it. So I repeated this melody in my head for 5 days until we got it.
Yeah, I definitely, once I realized that like that could always be the go-to when something popped in my head, it made life so much easier. Granted, sometimes you do that like half asleep, like right before you go to bed, and you're kind of in that like twilighty zone. And then you get up the next morning and you're like, oh, I had that great idea and I recorded it, but you're so sleepy that it doesn't sound like anything. But that's great, yeah. Yeah, it's always a shame, but I'm glad you got it down. I'm glad you got it down in time.
But yeah, we came home and I immediately started working on it. I think by the middle of February, I had a almost complete demo that I showed them. I think it was just vocals for piano, just the piano melody on the vocal line. Otherwise, like the rest of it was demoed out already.
Very cool.
It went very smooth when I wrote that one.
So another super cool feature of this single is that you guys brought in a choir to do some of those backing choral vocals. So tell me a little bit about the process and like, why did you decide to go with a choir instead of, I mean, there are faster and easier ways to do it, right, in production, but you guys chose the challenging way, and I love that. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, we've opted for live choir vocals pretty much since the beginning, although our first iteration was that was a handful of friends from community college who could, hold to a pitch, and that's about it. So it's certainly evolved over time, but we've always agreed that although orchestral instruments have become quite convincingly replicated in virtual format with virtual libraries. There's something about a human voice that we haven't reached the point of being able to replicate yet, not in a genuine, convincing, dynamic way. So although we did kind of experiment with some software that is out there with virtual choirs, and there's certainly potential for it when all you need is like the epic, like John Williams, like, open vowel kind of epicness, that definitely could work. But when we use our choir kind of as an additional storyteller, the lyrics that the choir sings are also still very important and often very punctuated or accented or very rhythmic. It's something that really only a live choir can do. So we're very lucky to have found such a talented group that's local to us and talented, like I said, and willing to work with us. And we're very blessed to have them.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's always such a difficult balancing act in this subgenre. Like, everybody would like to have a giant choir or a giant orchestra doing those backing pieces, but it can be really hard to find the right people. So that's great. It adds such an amazing layer to the track. It definitely, I don't know how hard you had to work to make it happen. It was probably quite a bit, but it sounds totally worth it.
Yeah, the choir that we work with is amazing. They had one night of like 2.5 hours, 3 hours of rehearsal for the entire album. And then they went into the studio the next day and got the entire album done in 2.5 hours.
Wow.
It was insane the way they work. We're really happy that they turned out as good as they did.
And you guys are doing kind of a joint show with them in May, right? Your Requiem Metallum show, am I right?
Yes, and it's also going to serve as our album release show. So when we were in the studio with the choir during the kind of downtime break that we had in the middle of all of it, we were talking to Sam, the director, and he kind of pitched to us this idea that he had of wanting to put a show together with us or with some other kind of band where they sort of metalify classic choral repertoire. And from that conversation, what ended up coming together is this kind of two-act concert where the first half will be exactly as it was pitched to us, a selection of 3 or 4 choral pieces that'll have metal instruments arranged to accompany it. And then the second half will be performing our songs with the choir backing. And we could not be more excited for it. It's like one of those bucket list dream come true kind of shows that, like you said, not everybody has access to a choir, let alone one as talented and available as the one we have that, who knows if the stars will ever align again. So we're definitely going to make the most of it. And it's definitely going to be a night to remember.
Yeah, that's so cool, especially at a time like when a lot of bands, and out of necessity, right, having to use a lot of backing tracks, a lot of synths and things instead. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people need to do it, but when you've got those resources and when you can spin it into like a really cool, unique show, I wish I could come out for that. So other parts of the album. So what are some of your other favorite kind of moments on this album?
I'll let Sarah go first.
Fred needs to think about it. There's so many fun bits throughout this whole album. I guess I'll be a little vain first and talk about the song I had the most hand in, the quote unquote ballad on the album, which is really more of a funeral dirge, Lament de Morgan. I went into the album writing with the goal of wanting to have at least one song that I could claim as entirely mine, and this is that one. It's told from the perspective of Morgan Le Fay, and she is one of the 6 Fey queens carrying King Arthur's casket. And there's a part in the song that's kind of a bridge section where the other female voices are kind of humming this melody, and then I come in over it on these open ahs, and it's meant to kind of mimic the wails of grief from someone who's lost someone so dear to them. And I hit this really high note that's like, it comes through very pretty, but it's also got this twinge of like, that grief and that just, those shoulder heaving sobs in musical form that still sound nice overall. And I was really excited to kind of experiment with that on that song.
It's great. Yeah, I love hearing about those moments where you're trying to match an emotion, and then you're also trying to stretch yourself as a vocalist, right? Which matching those two ideas together can be really challenging too. So it's great when those pull off. Okay, Brad, we've given you time. Now you have to tell us your favorite moments.
Favorite moments. There are a lot.
Good.
I think that we talked about it a little bit, but Sons of Fenrir I'm incredibly proud of. I think that's probably one of, if not the best song that I've written. I also really like the song Armored Heart just because of the way it flows, and it was another one that was it wasn't easy to write, but the work was very steady on it. There was never any writer's block or anything that went on with that one. Other specific moments, there's a song called Under a Midnight Sun, which is an instrumental, and I wrote it with Chris and AJ, our drummer, Chris are the guitarist. And we wanted to add the choir to it. And I was like, well, what could the choir do that's like a big standout part to this song? And when the bridge of that song hits, they do this big slide down where I had all 16 members of the choir like started a note, just slide to like the lowest note that they could. It just kind of like slides and then falls away, and then they hit the chord again for the next measure. That's a really cool part. That's a standout moment from the recording sessions that I remember. And then,
that's another thing that you can only get with a live choir too.
Yeah, I tried that with MIDI. It sounded real weird. And then the last track on the album is By the Tavern's Light. It's a song that we all wrote like significant amounts for. And our keyword with that one was just to have fun with the song. We're not trying to be super epic with it. We're not trying to be real emotional or anything. We're just trying to have fun with that song. And that's what we did when we were recording it as well. The bridge of that song has a section where there's like hand claps and these sounds of people banging glasses on the table. So what we did, I actually have it right here, this table that's behind me here, we stuck a microphone in that drawer that's in the front. And then Chris and I would drop mugs on it to get the glasses clinking on the table effect.
That's awesome.
That's a very memorable night of recording. And to get more sound, I just threw like a bunch of change in that drawer. So they all like clinked around and stuff. Yeah, that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love those kind of non-traditional, impromptu, improvised production elements. They always add so much like texture.
Yeah.
And they're always a great story too, which is a good side benefit as well.
Yeah.
So you guys have been at this for quite a while now. What are some of the kind of most important or hardest lessons that you guys have learned on your heavy metal journey?
Something that I think a lot of us have come to realize that this is an industry that you get back what you put into it very much. If your audience finds that you're being very genuine and that they can connect with your music on a personal level, you'll get a lot more response from them that way. So that's something that we always try to do, is we try and be very genuine when we're online. We're live streaming with our patrons. We like to play like board games and stuff with them. Yeah, I'd say that's probably a big one.
Yeah, there's kind of two big things that come to mind. First, as a vocalist, as someone who has to use a human body as our instrument, it's been very, very eye-opening each of the times that I've gone into the studio to record, and just learning to kind of trust my intuition and how I'm feeling in my gut. If you're trying to get a take and the take's just not coming, and you're getting more and more frustrated and you're trying to force it to happen, you're just going to be wasting your time and wearing your voice out. And the value of just stepping away and taking like a 5-minute breather can be just like a coin flip, a switch flip, if you will, of kind of reconnecting with where you need to be to deliver the right take that you're trying to get, and not just allow yourself to fall into this cycle of frustration. So I hold that very dear. And then as far as like Brad said, the business side of things, it's been a really difficult but important lesson to learn that you can be doing everything right. You can make amazing music. You can present yourself genuinely. You can put on an amazing live show. You can, have a professional setup for all of your social media. And yet you can't force success to happen. You can do everything that you have in your power to influence things to go the way that you want. But ultimately, it's up to fate in a way. There is a lot to be said about luck playing a factor in whether someone becomes successful or popular. You don't have everything under your control. You eventually do have to surrender things to happen if they're meant to happen.
Yeah, that's always a thing that I have to remind myself when things are, when things don't go quite as well as you'd hoped. And also that, like, ultimately the most important thing is making music that you're proud of, because that's really all that's the only thing that you have maximum control of, right? You could, and then you can try to get it out to people, market it, build your community, which I think is super important, and it is another great kind of like side benefit of this weird path we've chosen for ourselves. But yeah, I totally agree. That's one of the hardest lessons, one of the things that I continually am having to tell myself, especially because we're still pretty early on in our journey. And so you run into a lot of those brick walls, and you got to remind yourself why you're doing it, and that, there is that element of luck to it. So how has the reception for Arcane Horizons been so far? I know there should have been a segue in there, but I couldn't come up with one. Has there been any kind of reactions or reviews or anything that said something surprising, or maybe came from some surprising places?
The album, I believe, has been sent out for review yet, but if it has, it's been like within the last week. So we haven't really gotten much back. The people that have heard it have had very nice things to say about it, especially when the single came out. We got a lot of positive feedback from fans, both old and new. We had a bunch of new people come find us and tell us how much they like the song. So if that song is, and the reception of that song is any indication for how the rest of the album's going, I think it's sitting pretty well.
Yeah. We've been sitting on these songs for so long, and we've all been in love with them for so long, that now that we're just beginning to share them with the rest of the world, it's so exciting to see the reactions that come in. And like Brad said, it's been very positive so far. I've heard and seen several people say, like, if the rest of the album is as good as this first single, like, it's album of the year material, which gets us very excited. And also the music video that went along with the solo or the single seems to have somewhat hit the algorithm on YouTube. So it's been pulling in a lot of views, a lot of new faces. And with that, some of the not so nice comments, which is kind of a rite of passage for any band that's starting to get popular. So, at this point, it's just stuff that we can kind of giggle about, like how the unpopular girl at high school likes Nightwish. That's one of them.
I kind of deleted this comment, by the way.
Oh, we did? Yeah. So, like I said, we understand it's a rite of passage, and it's going to happen, and we get to chuckle at it because we know overall, most people have loved it.
Yeah, you always gotta have a bit of a thick skin for that. It can be hard sometimes when you're putting your baby out there into the world. But yeah, that's definitely something that all musicians must learn to deal with, or you're gonna have a bad time.
Exactly.
So you guys crowdfunded this album, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys operate independently, right?
We're an independent band in that we don't have a label behind us. Nothing against bands that do labels. We've taken it by our case. If we get to a point where we want to pursue a label, we may look into that. But for this one, we stayed independent. We do have a management team and somebody that helps with social media marketing and stuff. So we're not completely alone in doing all this stuff. They are very, very helpful. But yeah, we did crowdfund this album. We raised like $9,000 right around there for it.
Sounds about right, yeah.
Which was very helpful in getting a couple nice music videos recorded, getting a good mixing and master on it, getting some nice artwork done. Yeah, and we actually crowdfunded the last album too. That helped a lot with that one as well.
Yeah, crowdfunding's great, and it's great to kind of like, it helps get the community involved, and it also helps them like feel invested in the stuff that you're doing, because they are, your community is the reason you do the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's always super great. Okay, so this is kind of the I don't know, this feels like one of those little like checklist questions that you've always got to get. Favorite heavy metal album?
Did Brad want to go first on this?
I've said for a long time now that my favorite album, just not even metal, just overall, is Meredith by Lead's Eyes. It's not the heaviest album in the world, but it's very varied in the storytelling they do, and the way they play with different languages on that album has always really spoke to me. Yeah.
Yeah, they've always been a favorite of mine in the kind of symphonic genre. They've always, I think, taken the formula and played with it a little bit in some interesting ways.
Yeah, I had to think kind of hard about this one, because it's easy to come up with like a favorite album from a particular band, but across a whole genre is a little trickier. So I cheated a little bit, and I have two. It's a tie between Nightwish's Imaginarum. I think that's some of Tuomas's best songwriting. It's very cinematic. And then they literally went and made a movie of it. So yeah, I hold that very high. And then also just for more personal reasons, as Seven Spire's Solveig, their first album, has a very special place in my heart, not just because it's genuinely good music, but because that was the album that they played when we went on tour with them back in 2019. And that was our first tour as a band. And so there are a lot of happy memories tied to those songs and hearing them every night.
Well, for being a cop-out, that was a very good answer. Okay, now, what could be a slightly more challenging, maybe it's an easier question. What is your favorite non-metal album?
Sarah can go first this time.
Oh, okay, I see how it is. I'm going to go in a completely different direction and say, outside of metal, I'm also a very big EDM fan. So I'm going to say I very much think one of the perfect albums that exists out there is the Glitch Mob's Drink the Sun. I like their particular style of EDM.
Well, when you come out to Denver, you'll have to talk to our bass player Eric. He's a big guy. There's also another band from town that kind of does. It's kind of symphonic metal, but it throws in like EDM elements. They're called Signs of Tranquility. If you haven't listened to them, I think you'd dig it. Just got to do a little plug for those guys since you mentioned you're an EDM fan.
Yeah, I've heard that name before.
Yeah, they're really, really great. All right, Brad, you're up.
I might have to cop out like Sarah did. I'll try not to. I don't listen to a ton of non-metal. I'll listen to like some soundtrack stuff. I am a fan of like Fleetwood Mac. Their album Rumors I thought is very strong. There is a single album that was put out by the actress Yogovish, Resident Evil, what she's watched before. She put out an album in the 90s that's like super chill, just folk music, which is not what you expect out of her, and it's actually really good.
Really?
I like that one.
Is it like Eastern European folk music?
The last song on it's, I believe, a Ukrainian folk song.
Very cool.
So, yeah, it's a fun listen. And then at Mad with Power last year, we ran into Basil Silver, the drummer for Power Glove. And he has a side project called Spirit of the Woods that I've become a little obsessed with.
Only a little.
I know Sarah some, and she really likes it too.
Yeah, I love it.
It's very not metal. When we were on
like
with
folk chill hop, kind of, but more on the folk than the chill hop.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good. I know that was a cop out because I gave you like 3 answers, but
that's all right. If I let Sarah do it, I have to let you do it too.
Sure.
It's only fair. So you've got the new album coming out. You've got the big show in Minneapolis for your CD release, where you're going to be playing with the MPLF choir. The Minneapolis choir.
Impulse. Yeah.
So what else are you guys up to this year? What is the big plans for AfterTime?
The big show after that is definitely Mile High Power Fest in Denver. We're so excited for that one. I think I'm just as excited for that as I am for the choir show.
Yeah.
Because we played in Denver. That was our first stop on our 2019 tour, and we haven't gotten to come back yet. And that was one of my favorite cities to be at.
I've personally visited Denver since then, but not for music reasons.
I drove through it once. Yeah, that. And then we're trying to work out some stuff for the summer, but it's too early to really say much yet. We haven't heard much back ourselves yet.
Yeah, now is kind of just kind of the start of that summer planning season from both sides for venues and for bands. So
yeah.
But yeah, Mile High Power Festival, I can't wait. I mean, for us, it's going to be our first big festival show, our first show in like one of the big venues.
Yeah.
So, and it's going to be I'm really excited to just get to like meet all of you guys in person. So I like to have this earlier conversation so that you guys know what kind of whack job you're dealing with when you have a conversation with me for real, especially after we all have a couple beers together. So what are some of your, long-term plans? What are some of the things, and maybe you don't have one, and sometimes those can be dangerous, but what are some of the things as you're looking out, a year or a couple years down the road that you're maybe hoping to accomplish, or just avenues you're looking to explore?
Oh boy, long-term plans in this economy?
I know, and I asked two musicians, and that was just, what an awful choice.
Yeah. The main thing that comes to mind for me personally is I'm also involved in the scene, video game music, and there's a whole community of people who perform covers. Like Brad mentioned, we're connected with Basil from Power Glove. That's just one example. But I've kind of had a few opportunities pop up to lend my vocals to a few different video game covers. And that's been really exciting to do and to tap into that part of my passion. So I'm hoping to be able to do more of that and maybe even put together some of my own arrangements. We'll see. It's exciting to think about.
Yeah, it's super cool. I saw that Ty from Lords of the Trident is going to be singing some Sonic with a Philharmonic.
Yes.
I think here in a couple of months. So that'll be a really cool show.
Yeah, we don't have anything specific planned for after Mile High Power Fest. That's kind of like the big thing that we're working towards this year. But so after that, it's a little up in the air. I get a little restless if I'm not composing music every so often. So there's already ideas kind of going for the next release, but it's too early to talk too much about that. Plus, our second album hasn't even come out yet. So we got one to go through first.
I know there's always that part of you as a musician that just wants to put the cart before the horse and just keep on cranking it out. But especially because it always feels right by the time you get to by the time you put the recording together, there's always that huge gap between when it's done and when you release it. And yeah, you get so stir crazy just wanting to make something new. And by the time you release it, I mean, you still love the songs, but how many times have you listened to them? Is it 1,000? Something like that. And so you're always just kind of like, something fresh sounds good. So give us the scoop real quick on where people can find your socials, find your new music video, all of that good sort of stuff. As we wrap up here.
I thought you're going to go for it.
No, go ahead.
So as far as streaming and purchasing our digital copies of our music, anywhere that you would stream or buy music, Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, all of those great places. We have a YouTube channel that has all of the tracks from the Farthest Shore, as well as all of our music videos, including our new Sons of Fenrir video. We're also active on all of the social media, Facebook, Instagram, at AfterTime, which is one word. And then if you want to kind of hang out with us on a more casual level, we do have a Discord server that we like to do some fun stuff in there. We're about to do our first session of our book club, and we stream games sometimes. We do little hangouts in there. So we have the invitation link for that available on our existing social media.
Awesome. Sarah, Brad, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to meet up with you guys in August at Mile High Power Festival. Until then, best of luck with the release and with Requiem Metallum. That'll be a really cool show. If you're in the Minneapolis area, you would be a fool to miss such a thing. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much.